You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
Strata is your solution for securing on-prem and cloud apps without the hassle of refactoring. Modernize legacy systems with MFA or passwordless authentication and ensure continuous identity availability across multi-cloud environments. Say goodbye to tech debt and hello to seamless integration. Strata helps you reduce stress and gain control over your identity architecture, enhancing security and efficiency. Join industry leaders like 3M, Navy Federal, and Kroger who trust Strata for their identity needs. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to share your biggest identity challenge and receive a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Transform your identity management today at strata.io/cyberwire. And our thanks to Strata for being a longtime friend and supporter of this podcast.
Happy Friday all, and to our listeners in India, happy first National Space Day. August the 23rd was declared as the National Space Day in celebration of India's achievements on the moon in 2023. The Chandrayaan-3 mission accomplished a safe and soft landing of the Vikram lander on the lunar surface on August the 23rd of last year. This made India only the fourth country to land on the moon and the first to land near the southern polar region. Now that's something worth celebrating.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS Egress. Go for deploy.
Today is August the 23rd, 2024. I'm Alice Carruth, and this is T-minus. Amazon's Project Kuiper expands its footprint at KSC. NASA selects 3 new launch providers for future missions. SpaceWorks have announced recipients of a strategic funding increase. And Alicia Siegel from NSF will be bringing us the Space Traffic Report, taking a look at the space launch news from the week that's been and a look ahead at the week to come. We're kicking off this Friday with news of expansion and progress with Amazon's Project Kuiper. Project Kuiper, which is Amazon's low Earth orbit satellite broadband network, is expanding its footprint at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Last year, the company broke ground on a $120 million satellite processing facility. Now the team is investing another $19.5 million, adding to a secondary support facility at the site. This addition brings a total investment at the site to nearly $140 million. Project Kuiper's 42,000 square foot building will provide additional space to process and store flight hardware ahead of launch, allowing for a regular cadence of missions to deploy the planned 3,232 satellite constellation. The expansion will be adjacent to the existing 100,000 square foot structure for the satellite processing facility. And here's more big news. The company also used the announcement of the expansion to call for more hires. So if you're looking for work in the Florida region, then this could be the place for you. In contrast to the expansion in Florida, Jeff Bezos' other space company, Blue Origin, has been facing setbacks. Local news outlets are reporting that the New Glenn rocket sustained damage to the upper portion of the rocket at its factory in the Seattle area. In a separate incident, another upper stage portion failed during stress testing and exploded. New Glenn is scheduled to launch before the end of this year. Sources say that Blue Origin is working to resolve the issues quickly. NASA has announced it'll be using 3 new commercial companies for future launches. The US Space Agency has selected the companies to provide launch services for future agency missions through its venture-class acquisition of dedicated and rideshare contract known as a VADR. Aeroscience and Technology, Impulse Space, and Momentus Space have been selected for the firm fixed-price, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts set at a maximum total value of $300 million across all VADR contracts. NASA selected the new launch providers in accordance with the VADR's on-ramp provision, allowing the agency to add new capabilities not available or identified at the time of the initial award. Congrats to them. The US Space Force's innovation arm, SpaceWorks, have announced the program year 2024.2 strategic funding increase or strat fee contract award selections from its Phase 2 eligible applicants. Funding amounts within the strat fee program range from $3 million to $15 million for each defense project. The program year 20.2 SpaceWorks strat fee cohort accounts for a total of $140 million in SBIR STTR funds, $155 million in government matching funds, and $217 million in private matching funds. Small businesses that have received SBIR STTR Phase 2 award within the prior 24 months may be eligible to apply for the strat fee program. This year's SpaceWorks 24.2 strat fee selections supporting the US Space Force are American Lithium Energy, Apex Technology, Impulse Space, Inversion Space Company, K2 Space, Outpost Technologies, Portal Space Systems, Turian Space, and WildStar. Impulse Space are definitely having a very good week this week. The Titusville Cocoa Airport Authority have received a $5.8 million state grant to put towards a future 1.4 million square foot industrial park, which will be built for high-tech space and aerospace companies. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis presented a ceremonial check during a press conference inside the Valiant Air Command Warbird Museum hangar at Space Coast Regional Airport. State officials estimate the future Space Coast Innovation Park will create more than 900 jobs. As I mentioned at the top of the show, it's National Space Day in India, and the country's Department of Space used the day of celebration to outline future space plans. India is planning to send its first astronaut to space next year, establish a space station by 2035, and land an Indian on the moon by 2045. Gaganyaan, India's mission to launch an astronaut to space in 2025, was originally scheduled for 2022, but has repeatedly slipped in its intended schedule. Let's just say that missing launch schedules is nothing new in the space industry. The head of the Iranian Space Agency, Hossein Salareya, told state media that the agency is currently building dozens of domestically designed satellites for various purposes. 30 satellites are reportedly under development in Iran, of which 20 will be built by the private sector. The senior Iranian space official also noted that 12 satellites have been successfully put into orbit since August of 2021. He said the Iranian Space Agency currently has 14 satellites scheduled for launch. And NASA leadership is expected to announce an update on the Starliner crew test flight following an internal review tomorrow. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson and leadership will hold an internal agency test flight readiness review followed by a media conference at 1 p.m. Eastern. More details can be found by following the link in our show notes, and of course we'll be bringing you that update on Monday's show. That concludes this Friday's Intel briefing. But fear not, there are more stories for you to enjoy in the selected reading section of our show notes. One is an introduction to Gimbal Space from TechCrunch, and another is an announcement from Rocket Lab on a new appointment to their board of directors. Hey T-Minus crew, tune in tomorrow for a new AWS in Orbit episode. Tomorrow we have the full story on building opportunity with Axiom Space, enterprise IT technologies on orbit, and mission control from anywhere. It's an incredible look at the future of commercial space stations. Check it out while you're running errands, running for exercise, or as a relief when the kids are running you up the wall. You don't want to miss it.
The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business.
The Space Traffic Report is brought to you by our partners at nasaspaceflight.com. Alicia Siegel brings us a look at the space launch updates from the week that's just been, and a look ahead at the week to come, and we can't wait for the Polaris dawn.
I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and this is your weekly space traffic report for T-Minus Space. Starting off the week on August 16th, an SSLV lifted off from the Satish Dhawan Space Center in India, carrying 2 satellites into low Earth orbit. The main payload on this mission was a satellite called EOS-08, developed by the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, to test new technologies for small Earth observation satellites. EOS-08 sports an infrared telescope for, among other things, disaster monitoring, observation of volcanic activity, and satellite-based surveillance. It also hosts an instrument that studies weather using the Global Navigation Satellite System and a UV radiation dosimeter that's being tested for ISRO's Gaganyaan crew spacecraft. The second payload on this flight was a demonstration satellite for Space Rickshaw to test the company's satellite bus and deployment system. This was the SSLV's third launch and the final launch of the rocket's development program. With this successful flight, ISRO's new small satellite launcher is now ready for operational missions. A few hours later, we had a Changzheng 4B launch from the Xichang Satellite Launch Center in China. The rocket lifted off on August 16th at 7:35 UTC, carrying a few military remote sensing satellites. These satellites are outfitted with technology experiments for low Earth orbit constellations, but not much more is known about them due to the classified nature of the payload. Tracking data later revealed that the rocket had placed 9 satellites into low Earth orbit. The 16th was a busy day for spaceflight around the world, as a Falcon 9 also lifted off from California at 1856 Universal Time that same day. On board were a massive 116 payloads for the Transporter 11 rideshare mission. It was certainly a busy ride into sun-synchronous orbit. The payloads on this launch came from all over the world and include satellites from NASA, the European Space Agency, and at least 18 different countries. Notably, the mission carried Senegal's first satellite. The booster for this mission, B-1075, successfully ended its 12th flight by touching down on SpaceX's Landing Zone 4 at Vandenberg. On August 17th, the crew on board the International Space Station took a delivery of 2,621 kilograms of cargo. The Progress MS-28 spacecraft arrived at the station after a 2-day journey. At 5:53 UTC, Progress performed its automated docking to the aft port of the station's Zvezda module, where it will stay for the next 6 months. The cosmonauts at the ISS have already started unpacking the food and supplies on board. Later in the week, the European Space Agency's Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, or JUICE, flew by Earth and the Moon and sent back some amazing pictures. The spacecraft was launched on its way to Jupiter in April of last year, but it first needs to get on the right trajectory to get there. To do that, ESA designed the mission to include so-called gravity assists. During these carefully planned maneuvers, the spacecraft flies close by a planet or another celestial body. If done correctly, the planet's gravity accelerates the spacecraft and changes its trajectory. Or, in other words, the maneuver speeds up the spacecraft by slowing the planet down ever so slightly. JUICE made a particularly complicated approach using a double flyby, getting a gravity assist from both the Moon and Earth. ESA claims this is the first time a double gravity assist has ever been executed. On August 19th at 21:16 Universal Time, JUICE cruised by the Moon at roughly 700 kilometers from the lunar surface. This flyby sent JUICE on a path towards Earth, where it performed its closest approach a little over 24 hours later on August 20th at 21:57 UTC. It flew only 6,840 kilometers above Southeast Asia and the Pacific Ocean. Mission scientists took this occasion to test the spacecraft's cameras and scientific instruments to get to know their behavior a bit better ahead of its arrival to Jupiter. However, JUICE won't get there anytime soon. This flyby sent the spacecraft towards Venus for another gravity assist, which will take place next year. JUICE will then perform 2 more Earth flybys in 2026 and 2029. These will then get the spacecraft into its trajectory towards Jupiter, where it will finally arrive in 2031. While these gravity assists are not the fastest way to reach a destination, they do save a lot of propellant and are thus used for many science missions far from Earth. ESA estimates that this flyby saved the mission 100 to 150 kilograms of fuel. So we may have to be patient, but it'll sure be worth the wait. We also had another Starlink launch this week. On August 20th, a Falcon 9 took to the Floridian skies to launch 22 Starlink V2 mini-satellites. Liftoff took place at 13:20 UTC from Space Launch Complex 40. This mission was flown on a brand new booster, B-1085, which landed successfully on SpaceX's drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas. With 1 flight under its belt, it'll return to Port Canaveral ahead of its next flight, the much-discussed Crew 9 mission in late September. This mission was originally supposed to be the booster's first flight, but with the delay caused by the Starliner situation, it got a chance to gain a little bit of experience first. With this launch, SpaceX has launched a total of 7,917 satellites, of which 570 have re-entered and 5,738 have moved into their operational orbit. On August 22nd, another launch took place from China. This time, a Changzheng 7A lifted off at 12:25 UTC from the Wenchang Space Launch Site. The payload was the ChinaSat 4A communications satellite, which will provide voice, data, radio, and television service. Going into next week, on August 27th, we'll have the long-awaited Polaris Dawn mission. Falcon 9 is set to lift off from the historic Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, with the 4.5-hour launch window opening at 7:38 Universal Time. The crew of 4 will spend 5 days on board Crew Dragon Resilience, performing various tests and experiments. The next day, Falcon 9 is expected to launch another batch of Starlink V2 Mini and direct-to-cell satellites into low Earth orbit. This mission is set to lift off from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. The 4.5-hour window for this launch opens on August 28th at 5:50 UTC. And wrapping up the week, on August 29th, another Falcon 9 is set to launch from Vandenberg, carrying a payload for the U.S. National Reconnaissance Office. This is expected to be the third launch for the NRO's proliferated space architecture, also known as Starshield. The launch window for this mission has not yet been announced. I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and that's your weekly space news report. Now back to T-Minus Space.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. I live in a pretty rural area of the US near the southern border. We're the home of green chili, the second largest producer of pecans, and one of the oldest wine regions in the US. New Mexico is also the birthplace of the US space and missile program, so I do love a story when space and ag combine. Cornell University has produced an autonomous robot called, and I'm going to ruin this, Phytopatholobot. Real easy. To support NASA to monitor plant disease from space. If you have the chance, check out the video of the robots in action because it's pretty wild to see them in the wild. It's currently working to support grape farmers, so it definitely has implications on my hometown in southern New Mexico and their wine produce. The robot detects spectral signatures of 3 kinds of devastating grape diseases: powdery mildew, downy mildew, and grapevine leaf roll virus, leading to early management of pathogens without needing farm workers to spot them. The data collected by the robots will help to ground truth NASA satellite data that could one day detect plant diseases from space. That video I mentioned is linked in our show notes, and it's from a demonstration as part of a 3-day Space for Ag tour by NASA leaders to better understand the remote sensing needs of Cornell Agritech researchers. The tour was designed to foster two-way dialogue with growers and stakeholders to improve NASA Earth Science's Earth observation satellites and instruments for specialty crop agriculture and viticulture, and foster a broader conversation about how to effectively translate research into practice. I probably won't need to tell you how much farming relies on space-based data, so it's cool to hear that NASA is working to amplify that story in practical ways. NASA, you're always welcome to come and visit my pecan orchard. Admittedly, I only have 19 pecan trees, but technically it's a small farm, and we'd love some space-based research to help keep those wise old trees going in the high desert. That's it for T-Minus for August the 23rd, 2024, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. If you like the show, and we really do hope you do, please share a rating and review in your podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send me an email at space@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your team smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode's associate producer is Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive director is Brandon Carve. Simone Petrella is our president, Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm Alice Carruth. Thanks for listening. I've actually lost my voice after this week, and you're going to get Maria back next week. Hurrah!